Hello friends, struggling with getting a Conqueror title? Or you just want a solid build for every subclass? Well, you go to the right place. I have carefully made a build able to do any level of content for each subclass. I was easily able to solo flawless a Master Lost sector within around 5 minutes with each one of these builds. Starting off with the artifact. It's going to be the same perks with all the builds, with the most important perks being Flashover, Particle Reconstruction, Dielectric, and Defibrillating Blast. The artifact is not too important for these builds, but it still enhances them. These builds will still be very good when the season ends and the new artifact comes out. First, we have the Prismatic Build. You can run any weapons with this build. This build is going to specialize with melee attacks while being amplified and having Devour. The exotic for this build is going to be the exotic class item for Warlock, with Synthoceps being the most important perk, and the preferred secondary perk being Inmost Light. For the super, we're using Song of Flame for the 90% damage reduction for the extra survivability, while doing some decent damage. The abilities we're going to be using is Phoenix Dive for the cure and how fast it can be used. Next, Arcane Needle for the 3 melee charges, and Vortex Grenade for weakening. For the 2 aspects, we're using Lightning Surge for the slide melee, which deals a lot of damage, and Feed the Void for Devour. As far as the fragments go, we have Facet of Dominance, Facet of Dawn, Facet of Balance, Facet of Purpose, and Facet of Protection. For the mods, we have Double Hands On with a Siphon. For the gloves, we have Heavy Handed, Focusing Strike, and Momentum Transfer. For the chest piece, we have Resistance mods. For the boots, we have Double Invigoration with Insulation. And for the bonds, we have Outreach, and Reaper. This build shreds everything in the game and is definitely my personal favorite for this season. Solar Warlock, an easy to use grenade and melee spam build, while also having Restoration and Radiant most of the time. For the loadout, I recommend Aberrant Action, as you must use a solo weapon for killing adds with this build. The exotic for this build is going to be Sunbracers. The super we are using is Song of Flame for the 90% damage reduction, alongside spamming melee and grenades just like the main build. Abilities we are using are Phoenix Dive for the restoration from heat rises, Incinerator Snap for the scorches, and Solar Grenade for the exotic synergy. As for aspects, we have Touch of Flame for enhanced grenades, and Heat Rises for restoration and cure. The fragments we are using are Ember of Torches, Ember of Ashes, Ember of Singeing, and Ember of Empyrean. The mods we're using for the build on the armor are Double Hands On the helmet with a Solar Siphon, Firepower, Momentum Transfer, and Focusing Strike on the gloves, Resistance mods on the chest piece, Invigoration, and Innervation on the boots, Outreach, Bomber, and Powerful Attraction on the bonds. This build has been around for such a long time, but it still feels so good to use. It's definitely been one of my favorite builds ever since Solo was changed in Season of the Haunted. Void Build got a bit of a buff this season, by them making the Magnetic Grenade Overcharge have 9 projectiles. You must have a Void Weapon for this build. I'd recommend anything with the stabilizing rounds, but I really like using Choir of One for this build, so I can build my grenade damage and reduce my grenade cooldown while dishing out crazy damage as well. The exotic we're using is Verity's Brow to enhance those overcharged grenades. The super we're using is Nova Bomb Cataclysm for the damage. For the abilities, we have Healing Rift for the extra restoration, Pocket Singularity to get enemies volatile, and Magnetic Grenade to overcharge it. As far as aspects go, we have Chaos Accelerant to overcharge the magnetic grenades, and Feed the Void to have Devour. For the fragments, we have Echo of Harvest, Echo of Persistence, Echo of Undermining, and Echo of Expulsion. For the armor mods, we have double Ashes to Assets, with a Void Siphon, Firepower, Grenade Kickstart, and Fastball on the gloves, 2 resistance mods with Charged Up on the chest piece, double Innervation with Stacks on Stacks on the boots, and double Bomber with Time Dilation on the bond. Void builds for a while have been in a rough spot, but I feel with the changes made in episode of Heresy, this build is really good and quite insane with the artifact buffs. Arc builds this season have gotten a new aspect, and they are pretty amazing. But with the addition with bolt charges, arc builds are actually spectacular. For loadout, I'm using Delicate Tomb for Ionic charges to get my super and create bolt charges, creating an awesome combo of lightning strikes everywhere. The exotic we're using for this build is going to be Geomag Stabilizers, with its new synergy to almost always have your super up. For the super, we're using Chaos Reach to synergize with Geomag Stabilizers. For the abilities, we're using Healing Rift, Chain Lightning to jolt targets. For the abilities, we're using Healing Rift for some nice health restoration, Chain Lightning. For the abilities, we're using Healing Rift for a nice restoration, Chain Lightning to jolt targets, and Flashbang Grenade to stun champs or just blind enemies regularly. For the aspects, we have Lightning Surge for the slide melee that does a lot of damage, and Ionic Sentry to build bolt charges while doing some decent damage with the sentry itself. For the fragments, we have Spark of Frequency, Spark of Resistance, Spark of Discharge, and Spark of Ions. As far as the mods go on the armor, we have Double Hands-On with a Siphon, Heavy-Handed, Impact Induction, and Momentum Transfer on the gloves, Resistance mods on the chest piece, Double Invigoration with Innervation on the boots, Reaper, Outreach, and Bomber on the bonds. Arc build Warlocks were never really for me, but I've had a lot of fun with this build. Creating Ionic charges, getting bolt charges, and using your super a bunch, this build is one of the best builds in the game as of right now. Stasis Warlock has been in a rough spot for a while, but this build can easily take down even the toughest of enemies. While using Stasis turrets to freeze and slow targets, we are also generating lots of frost armor. Something with Chill Clip is recommended for this build. I'd recommend something like Riptide or Tenacious Mastery. The exotic reason for this build is Rhymecoat Raiment, turning our Stasis turrets into a fort. The super we're using for this build, Winter's Wrath, can do some good AoE damage while also being able to consistently keep champs or any dangerous enemies frozen. For the abilities, we have Healing Rift for the health restoration, and Glacier Grenade as an alternative to the Stasis turrets. For the aspects, we are using Bleak Watcher to create Stasis turrets, and Glacial Harvest to create frost armor from picking up Stasis shards. For the fragments, we have Whisper of Rime, Whisper of Shards, Whisper of Fissures, and Whisper of Torment. As for the armor mods, we have Ashes to Assets with Double Siphon, Momentum Transfer, Ball String Detonation, and Fastball on the gloves, Resistance mods on the chest piece, Double Innervation with Invigoration on the boots, Double Bomber with Outreach on the bonds. Stasis Warlock was never the best, but with this build, it makes you think that it might be the best in the game. And you're gonna have a hard time getting killed by enemies when they're all frozen. Strand builds on Warlock have been pretty good for a while, but with this season's artifact, I was able to make a pretty crazy build that destroys everything in the game. Threadling is going to be everywhere, and your weapons are going to be doing massive amounts of damage. The loadout requires you to use a fusion rifle or a linear fusion rifle. I'd recommend Vex Mythoclass, Scatter Signal, or you can use Queenbreaker. For the exotic, we are using Rain of Fire to become Radiant with fusion rifles and or linear fusion rifle Final Blows. And for the reload, when using Weave Walk. For the super, we have Needle Storm. It does a lot of damage and can be really good when dealing with bosses or champions. For the abilities, we have Healing Rift for the health restoration, and Shackle Grenade for stunning champions or just dealing with annoying enemies. For the aspects, we have Weave Walk to activate Rain of Fire and to get Threadlings. And then we have Weaver's Call to activate Threadlings when using our class ability while in Weave Walk. For the fragments, we have Thread of Evolution, Thread of Generation, Thread of Ascent, and Thread of Warding. For the armor mods, we have Ashes to Assets, Double Siphon, Momentum Transfer, Bolstering Detonation, and Firepower on the gloves, Resistance mods on the chest piece, Invigoration, and Innovation on the boots, Reaper, Powerful Attraction, and Outreach on the bond. Strand Warlock builds really don't have much of a variety. It's usually only Threadlings or Unraveling or melee builds, and I didn't really like them that much. But with this build, with the artifact, it's very unique, and the synergy is really fun to use. And although I don't like using Strand that much, I probably will be using Strand more often this season. Alright, that's going to wrap it up. That is the best build for every subclass on Warlock. If you enjoyed, make sure to comment what your favorite build is, leave a like, and subscribe. I'm going to see you guys on the next video, being best build for every subclass on Titan. Alright guys, peace out.